Peace be with you. Friends, it is Palm Sunday, and we have the great privilege on Palm Sunday to read every year one of the Passion narratives. And this year, we're reading from the Gospel of Mark. So we read Mark's, and the extraordinary thing is Mark's is the very first one written. And there's a famous statement made by a 20th century theologian that the Gospels are basically passion narratives with long introductions. So in a way, the passion narrative is the whole of the gospel. So there's so much we can say about them. What I want to do today is something a little bit different. Instead of putting the focus on Jesus, I want to focus on a series of people around him as they react in different ways to the events of the passion. Kind of putting ourselves in the scene. Do we identify with any of these people as they react to Jesus as he comes toward his death? Here's really how the passion narrative opens up. It's the woman with the alabaster jar of perfume. Remember the scene where she breaks open this jar of very expensive perfume, and then she pours it on Jesus' head, and it scandalizes people around. They say, well, wait a minute, that's very expensive. Couldn't that have been sold and the money given to the poor? I mean, what a waste and what an over-the-top gesture. Well, of course, Jesus dismisses that critique, and he praises her and says in a way that's fulfilled every time we read this, what she has done will be remembered, for all time. Well, here's what I love about that scene, and she's one of the first now to react to Jesus as he's coming toward his death. His death represents God's extravagant gift to us. That God went all the way down. He went all the way into our dysfunction. And so she responds with an extravagant gesture. Yes, we could question it as they did long ago. We could sort of weigh it in the balance ethically and so on, but that's not the point. The point is she breaks open that jar of perfume as though she's breaking open her whole heart and pouring out her whole life and soul in gratitude to Christ. That's the right reaction, everybody. That's why Jesus praises her. What's our reaction to him? Is it a constrained, careful, moderate response? Or do we break open our hearts and pour ourselves out for him? Go now to the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus praying, sweating blood at this climactic moment of his life, this time of enormous struggle. And Peter, James, and John, his most intimate disciples, he takes them, with him. And what do? They fall asleep. I've told you before, throughout the Bible, falling asleep is a very bad thing. It's a symbol of the lack of spiritual attention. That something of great spiritual moment is happening and we don't care. We fall asleep. It makes no difference to us. In a way, everybody, it's a symbol of contemporary secularism, seems to me. The things of God are happening all the time. God's activity in the world, God's love poured out, the sacraments, the church, the preaching of the church, the word of God. And what's our response more often than not? We fall asleep in indifference. Move into their space, Peter, James, and John, these intimate friends of Jesus, by the way. So especially those of us who, we're in the church and we're with the program, okay. But what are we doing as the Lord is acting in our lives and in the world? Are we snoozing away? Think of the Old Testament symbol here of Eli in the temple. Remember the scene where the Lord calls to Samuel, and the two of them are asleep in the temple. And the Bible says that, visions and locutions of God were very rare in those days. Why? Because God decided to withdraw? No, I would say because especially religious people began to fall asleep even in the temple. Peter, James, and John, in the very presence of Christ at the climax of his life, fall asleep. Here's a scene, of course, it's unique to Mark, and I've preached on it before. I love it. There's a mysterious young man. He's not named, But when they come to arrest Jesus now in the Garden of Gethsemane, and there's the little struggle, and then the disciples kind of run away, and there's this young man we hear who runs away, and as he runs, they grab at his tunic, and it is taken away in the hand of the man, and the young man just runs naked into the night. And you say, what a kind of peculiar detail to include. Well, it's peculiar until we remember the word that's being used there for the garment is the same word that's used for the baptismal garment. When someone was baptized, they put on this white garment that symbolized their devotion to Christ. They had put on Christ. How often, at the moment of truth, when our Christian faith, listen now, is going to cost us something, maybe when they're coming after us, when things are getting dangerous and dicey because of our faith, what do we do? Do we stand our ground, or do we run off into the night, leaving behind our baptismal identity? That's a great scene. It's difficult to take in, I'll grant you that, but that's a very important scene for us to identify with. How often, if I ask myself in the course of my life, am I like that young man? That when things got a little difficult, I abandoned my baptismal identity, ran away from the struggle. What's your attitude at those moments of truth? Another wonderful scene now, the high priest, they brought Jesus to the Sanhedrin for trial. High priest, after hearing various witnesses, said, well, okay, let's cut to the chase here. I mean, are you the Blessed One? Are you the Son of the Blessed One, the Son of God? And Jesus answers in such a shocking way that the high priest tears his robes and declares blasphemy. What did Jesus say? He quoted Daniel chapter 7. Daniel speaks of seeing the Ancient of Days, and then coming on the clouds, one like the Son of Man. And the Ancient of Days gives him his authority, and so on. It's a messianic prediction, yes, but even more than that. This one coming on the clouds, this Son of Man, is someone who shares in the very authority of God. In citing this, Jesus saying, yes, I am, and you will see coming on the clouds the Son of Man. What's he affirming? Not that he's just a great teacher, not that he's just a great political leader, not that he's just the Messiah in the conventional sense of that term, but is saying that he is God from God, light from light, true God from true God. And the high priest can't handle that. That's too much for the high priest. Listen, everybody, there are a lot of people today that are okay with Jesus as a distant historical figure. They're okay with him as a literary device. They're okay with him as an inspiring teacher of the spiritual life. But they can't handle the claim, coming, mind you, from his own mouth, the claim that he is God from God, light from light, true God from true God. But that's what's at stake when it comes to Jesus. Are you with him or are you against him? To be with him is to say, you're the Son of God. You're the Son of God. To fall short of that is effectively to be against him. How often are we in that stance of the high priest where we tear our garments because we can't handle that central claim of the church? Next, Peter, the head of the apostles, the first pope, Peter, Jesus' intimate friend. Oh Lord, I don't know what the others are going to do, but I will never betray you. I wonder how often in our spiritual lives we say something like that. Lord, of course not. I'm your faithful follower. You're my everything. I'll always, Lord, be with you and follow you. And then the minute that scapegoating mob breaks out, remember in the courtyard of the high priest's house, they're warming themselves by the charcoal fire. It's a cold night. And someone notices Peter. Well, he was with that Jesus. No. I don't even know him. Yes, you were. I saw you. No, I'm not. Your accent gives you away. You're a Galilean. I tell you, I don't know him. 3 times he denies him. Again, everybody, we're fellow sinners here. How many times in the course of our lives do we who have pledged our complete loyalty to him, but again, when things get a little dicey and difficult, when affirming Jesus means we might get ourselves in some serious trouble, do we stand firm or do we deny, as even Peter did, even the first pope did? Next, we hear about the Roman soldiers. They come and they put that crown of thorns on his head. If the Shroud of Turin is right, it wasn't so much a ringlet, but a cap placed upon the whole top of his head. They put the reed in his hand like a mock scepter. They cover him in purple, and then they beat him and spit upon him, and they laugh at him. Is there a lot of that going on today? You bet. And, you know, it's got an old vintage, is the mockery of religion. I can give you, I won't bore you with it. You can go on the internet, find them. There are thousands of examples of people today who love to mock Jesus. You know, not just ignoring him. That's the kind of secularism. That's the falling asleep. This is worse. It's knowing about him, but mocking him. Have we done it? That's a tough question on this Palm Sunday. Have we ever been like these Roman soldiers that, we're with our buddies or people are saying disrespectful things and we don't say anything, or we, even worse, join in? How often have we mocked the Lord? Mocked him with our words, mocked him with our lives, mocked him with the kind of people we associate with? Tough. I know, it's tough. And I think it's good on Palm Sunday, everybody, as we walk through this still terrible story of Jesus' passion, identifying with these various figures. I'll end, though, on a positive note. Throughout the Gospel of Mark, there is what the scholars call the messianic secret. That means that when people are tempted to say, oh, Jesus is the Messiah, he usually quiets them. Don't tell anybody. You know, and it's puzzled people for a long time. Why would Jesus be so reticent? Well, at the very end of the gospel, when Jesus' head has bowed in death, when he can no longer silence anyone, the Roman centurion says, truly this man was the Son of God. And now there's no messianic secret. Jesus doesn't quiet him. He can't. And so the words of the centurion, with which the story basically ends, go out across the centuries, coming from a very unlikely source, the Roman centurion who's putting him to death. But he's the one who says, as a kind of proto-evangelist, truly this man is the Son of God. And mind you, as I've said to you before, who was called Son of God in that place and time but the Roman emperor? Caesar was the Weos tu theou. He was the son of the God. The very fact that a Roman centurion, the one putting him to death, says, truly this man is the Son of God. That's the evangelical message. And in terms of this sermon, as we identify with these various people, can we say those same words? That's the question. Can we say those same words with that same confidence? Truly, this man is the Son of God. And God bless you. Peace be with you. Friends, I'm not sure if you're like me, but even though I love Lent and Easter and all the great festivities, it's kind of with a sense of relief that I return with the church to ordinary time. And how wonderful now on this 10th Sunday as we pick up ordinary time. The church gives us such a fundamentally important reading. Get out your Bibles. Look at Genesis 1, 2, and 3, these pivotally important chapters. Number 3, of course, is about the fall and original sin. To return to these stories is to discover again, listen, the basic dynamics of sin. The perceptiveness here is stunning. It's staggering how deeply the author perceives under God's inspiration the nature of sin. So listen now, as it's done in the typically biblical laconic narrative. After the man had eaten of the tree, the Lord God called to him and said, "Where are you?" Now, the omniscient God obviously is not having a bad day and having lost sight of his creatures. He knows exactly where they are. But what's being signaled here is sin always involves an alienation from God. John Henry Newman said that natural religion always wears its dark side outward. What he meant was, in the natural state, we know that God exists through our conscience, and we know that we're alienated from God. And it's true, we're all sinners. And so our experience of God is one of separation. God said, where are you? Where are my creatures? I've lost sight of you. It means really we've lost sight of God. We've wandered away. Fellow sinners, I know you feel this way. I know you experience God in just this way. He answered, I heard you in the garden, but I was afraid because I was naked, and so I hid myself. Gosh, there's so much spiritual power and eloquence in these lines. So I heard you in the garden, but I was afraid. Well, why would you be afraid of God? He wasn't afraid of God before the fall. He walked in easy fellowship with God. God's friend. I'm not afraid of him. What made him afraid? Well, because I was naked, and so I hid myself. Well, he was naked before, right? And he wasn't hiding himself. What happened? Sin awakens in us, just by its very nature, a sense of shame and self-consciousness. Now watch this, everybody. The best moments in life are, without exception, those times when you are least aware of yourself, right? Just think of the most splendid moments in your life, the best moments of a day. It's when you're lost in a project, or you're lost in the beauty of nature, you're lost in the wonder of a friendship and a conversation, a work of art, whatever it is. It's when you're least aware of yourself, you're happiest. Something Jordan Peterson said, I think, is dead right, and he says it's borne out by all the psychological research. Namely, self-consciousness and misery are psychologically identical. Think about that. What's misery? Well, it's the state of being self-aware. I've shared often before with you Augustine's definition of sin. Curvatus in se. When I'm caved in around myself, that's when I'm miserable. What happens to Adam here? He was naked before, wasn't afraid of God, wasn't ashamed, wasn't hiding from God. But now, in the wake of sin, which is alienation from God, violation of God's law, he becomes painfully self-aware, ashamed. He needs to cover up something in his life. You know, it's a wonderful image here of that unself-consciousness. Think of it when you're in the presence of a real friend, not someone that you're just acquainted with, but I mean a real friend. You can be psychologically naked. You can be self-revealing. You're not trying to hide something from that person. What happens is our sin awakens in us shame and the desire to hide and cover ourselves up. Well, it's exactly what we do painfully in the presence of God. You know, I think about this. As I record these words, finishing up a confirmation season. So I'm dealing with teenage kids, like 15, 16. And I'm not picking on the kids here. It's true of any teenagers anywhere in the world. You want to see people in a kind of agony of self-consciousness. Watch kids that age. There's something about a teenager, they're just so aware of themselves, and they don't want to say or do something that will make their friends laugh at them. They're in a kind of agony of self-regard, trying to hide. And what makes life wonderful is when we can finally let down all those guards and we can lose ourselves. We can forget ourselves. That's what's lost in the original sin. So first, it's an alienation from God. Mind you, before I forget, the where are you is a sign of the alienation, but it's also, and it's so important in the Bible here, is God doesn't give up on us. It's one thing if God had been offended by our sin, and the heck with them, the heck with them. They didn't listen to me. But see, the God of the Bible is not like that. There's a straight line from this image of God to the father of the prodigal son. He doesn't give up on us. He's after us. Where are you? Where are you? Looking for us, even as we run away from him. So, but the alienation gives rise to shame. And the shame gives rise to what? Well, watch how the narrative unfolds. The Lord says, well, then I can tell, you've eaten of the tree I forbade you to eat from. The man replied, the woman whom you put here with me, she gave me the fruit from the tree, and so I ate it. The Lord God said to the woman, why would you do such a thing? The woman answered, the serpent tricked me into it, and so I ate it. Watch the rhythm now. Alienation from God leads to shame, and the shame leads to blame. It's the shame and blame game. That's what happens to us. See, in our shame, our self-reproach, our awful self-regard, which is the same thing as misery, what do? We start casting about, blaming everybody around us. That's why I'm unhappy. She's why I did it. He's the problem. They're the problem. Does any of that sound familiar, fellow sinners? It's the basic dynamic. Alienation from God leads to shame, which in turn leads to blame. Now, if you doubt me on this, could I invite you, any time of the day or night, go on the internet. What do you find in this, I think, honestly, increasingly dysfunctional space? You see exactly the shame and blame game. What's going on but a kind of orgy of blaming and of shaming, right? Calling to mind people's sin, reminding people of their sin, and then blaming on all sides. Now, who's this serpent? Responsible ultimately for all this, the serpent who tempts them into sin, and therefore into shame, and therefore into blame. Who is he? Well, he's got a name in the Bible. I've talked about diabolos a lot, the scatterer. But his name in the Hebrew scriptures is the Satanas. Satan comes from that. It means the accuser, or even more precisely, the prosecuting attorney. What's the prosecuting attorney's job? Blame. To blame. They did it. He did it. She did it. The accuser. Somehow we are under the thrall of this accusing power. And he produces the world of sin, alienation, shame, blame that we all function in. I don't know about you, read this section again, Genesis chapter 3. You want to understand the dynamics that dominate so much of our lives. Now, let's go from that to our gospel. So this tells us, Genesis 3, how the world that we live in started. The shame and blame game, how it started. Who is Jesus? Well, God so loved the world, this fallen, dysfunctional world, that he sent his only son into it, that those who believe in him might find eternal life. He comes from outside the dysfunction, but into the dysfunction. That's the incarnation, if you want. I'm putting in more soteriological language there, the language of salvation. He came from outside the dysfunction, but entered into the dysfunction. Not of it, but in it. What's his job? To cast out Satan. So the root of this problem on the biblical reading is this accuser who's given rise to the alienation, shame, and blame game. What's Jesus' job? is to cast that power out. Watch how throughout the Gospels, Jesus reverses the shame and blame game. Is he about the business of shaming people? No, on the contrary, of inviting and forgiving. Neither do I condemn you. Eating and drinking with, yes, sinners and prostitutes and tax collectors. The blame game? No, the forgiveness game. The game of compassion. Inclusion. Now, I don't mean that in the kind of wokest sense as being used today, but yes, indeed, inclusion in this good biblical sense. Jesus' open table fellowship, inviting everybody in. Do you see how he's undermining Satan? Now, listen to this gospel, this interesting, weird gospel from Mark. When his relatives heard of this, meaning all that he was doing, and especially the exorcisms, they set out to seize him, for they said, he's out of his mind. See, they're right. I want you to see that. They're right. He is out of his mind, meaning he's not living in the space produced by the shame and blame game. He's come from outside of it. And so within the world of sin, he seems crazy because he is. He's turned that world upside down. And then I love this. The scribes, right, the official religious leaders, they come from Jerusalem and they say, hey, he's possessed by Beelzebul. And by the prince of demons, he drives out demons. Well, how about that for a stupid bit of logic, right? Which Jesus completely exposes. And listen to the language he uses. How can Satan drive out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom can't stand. If a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. No, I'm here to drive out Satan. That's what he's saying. I'm here to drive out this dynamic which has come to dominate all of human life, to undo the alienation, shame, and blame game by declaring and embodying a whole new kingdom. The kingdom of God. Not the kingdom that started with the original sin and has haunted and poisoned the human race ever since. Not that kingdom. I'm driving out the prince of that kingdom so as to become the Lord of this new kingdom of love and compassion and inclusion and forgiveness. There's the gospel, everybody. There's the gospel. A new world has come. The old prince is being cast out and a new king has arrived. Accept his kingship. Live within his kingdom. And God bless you.
What a marvel this liturgy is. What a privilege to be here. On this climactic night of the Church's liturgical year, we have the privilege of hearing this tour of salvation history. And think of all these readings, everybody, as like the medallions in a rose window, all circling around the central fact of the resurrection, They're all speaking, pointing to, illuminating the resurrection. We read from the creation account. Why? Because the resurrection of Jesus is the healing of all creation and the elevation and perfection of all creation. It's not just a one-off event, but it has to do with the renewal of the whole world. Why do we read the story of Abraham and Isaac? Because that's the rescue operation that God commenced by calling Abraham and making a covenant with him that God would share his life with his people would share their lives with him. What's the test? How fully is Abraham willing to give himself to the will and purpose of God? What do we see in Christ, especially in his dying and his rising, but the fulfillment of this covenant? Jesus in his humanity surrendering utterly to the will of the Father sacrificing his own Son, carrying through what Abraham was only called upon to do. The resurrection is the fulfillment of the covenant. Why do we read from the book of Exodus and the story of Moses? Because Jesus, in his dying and his rising, leads us through the waters of sin and death to newness of life. And in the process, conquers the powers of the world. Just as the Israelites are victorious over Egypt, so the risen Christ is victorious over all the powers of the world that are predicated upon cruelty and violence and hatred. God's love is greater than anything that's in the world. That's why we read from the story of Moses. Why do we read from the book of the prophet Isaiah twice, if you noticed, from Isaiah? The first time we hear from him, he says this: "The one who has become your husband is your maker." Can I suggest to everybody that's one of the most extraordinary lines in all the religious literature of the world? That we should honor the Creator, that we should obey the Creator, that we should be afraid of the Creator. I mean, that's in all the great religions and philosophies. But the one who is your maker has become your husband. Now that's Israelite religion. That's the wonderful peculiarity of biblical religion, that the maker of the whole universe wants to be bridegroom to us, meaning he wants utterly to share his life with us. Where is this relationship consummated, if you will? Where is it brought to its fulfillment? But in the dying and rising of Jesus. Jesus in his humanity surrendering utterly to God, God in the resurrection giving himself utterly to the human race. What Isaiah saw at a distance is fulfilled in the resurrection. Why do we hear a second time from Isaiah? "Just as from the heavens the rain and snow come down and do not return there till they've watered the earth, making it fertile and fruitful, so shall my word be that goes forth from my mouth. My word shall not return to me void, but shall do my will, achieving the end for which I sent it." What's the word, or better, who is the word that goes forth? Yes, the word of creation, yes, the word that comes through the prophets, but the word in the full sense is the word made flesh. The Father speaks his word, yes, into the world, but yes, also into our sinful condition. Yes, even to the limits of God-forsakenness. Yes, even into death itself, the Father speaks his word. Why? That it might bear God's mercy, might bear his salvific purpose, yes, even to the darkest and furthest places from him. And his word does not go forth in vain. And we see the truth of this in the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. God went all the way to God-forsakenness to find even the lowliest of us sinners. His word does not go forth from him in vain. Why do we hear from the prophet Baruch? Because he celebrates this wisdom of God. The wisdom of God that hung the stars and the planets, the wisdom of God that's available in all of creation, but that wisdom of God fully revealed in the folly of the cross. That means God's wisdom to save the world through the power of his word. That's why we hear from Baruch. Why do we hear from the prophet Ezekiel? My favorite of the prophets, Ezekiel. Listen. "I will take you away from among the nations, gather you from all the foreign lands, and bring you back to your own land. I will sprinkle clean water upon you and cleanse you from all your impurities." The dark power is a scattering power. That's what his name means in Greek, diabolos. We get devil from that, diabolic. Diabalein means to scatter. break apart. That's always the sign of the dark power. It divides us, scatters things apart. God's word, God's power is a gathering power, which is why the Lord Jesus says when the Son of Man is lifted up, and that means lifted up on the cross, but finally lifted up through the resurrection, when he's lifted up, he will draw all people to himself. Mount Zion, true pole of the earth, there all the tribes of the Lord go up. What happened on the top of Mount Zion? The prayer of the temple, yes, but ultimately the sacrifice of the cross and the resurrection. The Son of Man, risen from the dead, now becomes the Lord who gathers all the world to himself. That's why we read from Ezekiel. And why this gorgeous passage from Paul to the Romans. Paul, by the way, Rabbi Shaul, before his conversion, knew all these texts I've been referring to, knew them beautifully, knew them well. And Paul said, Jesus risen from the dead is the yes to all the promises made to Israel. Yes to creation, yes to the covenant, yes to what Isaiah prophesied, yes to what Ezekiel prophesied. And what's Paul saying? Are you unaware that we who were baptized into Christ Jesus were baptized into his death? What does a cross mean? Well, many things, but in Paul's imagination, the cross is the place where our sins are put to death. Being baptized into Christ Jesus means that the old self has died. Our sins have been nailed to the cross, that we might rise with him to newness of life. And then finally, everybody, from the gospel, this year we read from Mark. Remember a few days ago when we read the Passion narrative from Mark, we heard about this mysterious figure, a young man wearing only a white garment. And as they come to get Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane and everybody scatters, this young kid runs away and they grab at his cloak and they get it and he runs off naked into the night. And you wonder, well, who's this peculiar figure? One reading is, the church fathers saw it this way. He stands for all of us, clothed in the white garment of our baptism. But at the moment of truth, fellow sinners, what do we often do? We run into the night. We run away from him. We deny him. And we leave in the hands of our enemies our baptismal identity. But see, the Gospels never end with bad news. They're always good news. Does that young man make a comeback? The church fathers said, yes, he does. And you see it right here. On entering the tomb, they saw, it doesn't say angel, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, clothed in a white robe. And he said to them, do not be amazed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth the crucified. He's been raised. He's not here. Now, is he an angel? Sure. But he's also symbolically all of us sinners who tend to run away from the Lord. But once we recover our baptismal identity, once we know again who we are, we proudly wear the white garment of our baptism, and then we're ready to announce the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. He's not here. He's been raised. Backed up by Genesis and Exodus and Isaiah and Baruch and Ezekiel and Paul, backed up by all these great figures. We need to have that same confidence, everyone in this room, all of us, that same confidence of this young man in our white baptismal robes, declaring to all the world the resurrection, the resurrection, the resurrection. That's our Christian faith. That's our Christian vocation.